Today I want to talk about cyber law. Listen, my friends. Cyber law stands as the guardian of the digital realm, where the essence of liberty and security intertwine in the fragile dance of information. In the boundless expanse of virtual horizons, it is the compass that ensures our freedoms sail upon the seas of trust, integrity, and justice. That's a quotation by Isaac Christopher Lubogo. Find that in Cyber Law in Uganda by Isaac Christopher Lubogo. Now, cyber law, also known as the law of cyber for that purpose, is a branch of legal studies that deals with the legal issues and regulations related to the use of the internet and things like computers and digital technology. And therefore, it encompasses a wide range of topics. Some of them I'm going to mention. And also, as I mentioned, I'll emphasize the importance of cyber law. For example, topics like cybercrime, laws and regulations governing online criminal activities such as hacking, identity theft, online fraud, and cyberbullying. And then we've got things like privacy, laws protecting individuals' privacy online, including data protection, surveillance, and handling of personal information. And then there is what we call intellectual property in terms of regulations concerning copyrights, trademarks, patents, and the digital content distribution on the internet. And then there is what we call electronic commerce in terms of legal aspects of online transactions, such as electronic contracts in terms of digital signatures and consumer protection in terms of e-commerce. And then there is what we call cyber security in terms of laws and regulations that are aimed at safeguarding computer systems, networks, and critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. And then there's what we call internet governance in terms of issues that are related to the management and the governance of the internet, including domain name registrations and the internet service provider liability. And there's also what we call social media in terms of legal considerations surrounding social media platforms, in terms of user-generated content and online speech. And also in terms of jurisdiction is another area in cyber law in terms of determining which laws or courts apply in terms of what they call cross-border internet dispute and cyber crimes. So basically cyber law is an evolving field and it's constantly adapting to our changing nature of technology in terms of the internet, and therefore everyone, including legal personnel, are encouraged to specialize in cyber law in order to ensure that their work, synchronizes with what is happening today. Okay. Now, we also have a few other areas that I would also want to add on top of what I just mentioned. There is also what we call cyber warfare. You probably heard of the challenges that were happening between Russia and America during the election, if you remember that time. So cyber warfare, where laws and international agreements need to address what they call cyber attacks and cyber warfare between nations, including rules of engagement, for example, and also response in terms of mechanisms. How do you respond? Then there is also what we call data breach notifications in terms of regulations requiring organizations to notify individuals and authorities when a data breach occurs that usually compromises what they call personal or even sensitive information. Also what comes to mind is what they call digital copyright infringement. Here we're addressing legal issues that relate to unauthorized, for example, distribution or even reproduction of digital content, such as music, movies, and even software. Another one is what they call net neutrality. And here we're talking about debates and regulations around the principle of net neutrality in terms of which advocates for equal access on online content and services without discrimination by the internet in terms of service providers. And then another interesting one is what they call electronic evidence, where rules governing the collection and admissibility in terms of preservation of what they call electronic evidence in legal proceedings. Another interesting part still under cyber is cyber insurance, what we call legal considerations for insurance in terms of policies that cover financial loss resulting from cyber attacks and data breaches. And then also international cooperation, where we're talking about efforts to establish international cooperation in terms of treaties to combat cybercrime and address global cyber security challenges. And then also we have what we call cloud computing, Here are legal issues that are related to data storage, for example, in terms of privacy, in terms of security when using cloud-based services. And then another one where we have a book written, by the way, called The Internet of Things. Find that book, The Internet of Things by Isaac Christopher Lubogo. Again, here we talk about legal frameworks and regulations addressing the security and privacy implications in terms of connected devices in the Internet of Things ecosystem. And there's what we call also social engineering, in terms of legal aspects of social engineering attacks, which involve manipulation in terms of individuals to gain unauthorized access to information or even systems. So these are just a few examples of the diverse and multifaceted areas that cover cyber law. So what happens that as technology continues to advance, cyber law will definitely continue to evolve to address new challenges and opportunities in the digital world. So therefore, cyber law is highly relevant in today's digital age for those reasons that I just mentioned, but I also give some other reasons. One of the basic reasons why we think we need to emphasize cyber law in all law schools perhaps is, number one, protection of rights. Cyber law will also help us in terms of protecting our individual rights and organizations in terms of the digital realm. It will ensure that people have what they call legal remedies when their online privacy or even data or even intellectual property are actually violated. Number two, cyber law will help us to combat cybercrime with, for example, the increasing prevalence of cybercrime. Cyber law becomes extremely essential for the prosecution of offenders in terms of deterring criminal activities like hacking, identity theft, and online fraud. And then also, as another use, it will help us in terms of what they call data privacy. Basically, in an era where we have vast amounts of personal data that are collected and processed online, cyber law establishes those regulations that safeguard those individuals in terms of privacy and how to dictate how organizations shall even handle sensitive information. There's even a law now in terms of cyber, a right to be forgotten, where you have a lot of information and you feel you don't want it anymore on the net. Then there's what we call e-commerce and consumer protection. Cyber law provides the legal framework in terms of online commerce, ensuring consumers are protected in terms of digital transactions that have legal recourses in terms of case disputes as well. Intellectual property protection is another one where it governs the use and protection of intellectual property. In the digital space, for example, addressing issues like copyright infringement and patent violations and even digital piracy. Particularly, one that is extremely important is cybersecurity, where cyber law will encourage organizations to adopt security measures in terms of best practices to protect their network systems from cyber threats, in terms of contributing to what they call an overall online safety. And as I said, it's also extremely important in terms of international cooperation. As an interconnected world, cyber law will facilitate international cooperation and agreement in terms of addressing these global cyber threats and also harmonize legal standards across the borders. In terms of internet governance, cyber law will definitely help us in terms of playing a very, very vital role in terms of shaping the rules and regulations for governing the internet and ensuring its stability and openness. And then in terms of technological advancements, we can argue that as the technology evolves, so does cyber law. So it will adapt and address these emerging challenges such as those posed by artificial intelligence or things to do with blockchain and also the Internet of Things. By the way, we've written a book about artificial intelligence and legal personhood and blockchain and cryptography and then the Internet of Things. We have all those books written on lubogo.org. Cyber, in terms of cyber security awareness, cyber law will also help in terms of creating an awareness about digital risks and encourages us in terms of behavior online, fostering a safe and more secure digital environment. So in short, cyber law is extremely important because it will provide a legal framework needed to navigate these complexities. And therefore the emphasis in terms of ensuring that individuals and organizations can actually operate online with confidence in terms of security, but also in terms of legal protections. In terms of more advantages or more relevance in terms of cyber law, I'm making a case for cyber law because I think it should be something that should be made compulsory really in law school. In terms of business and economic impact, cyber law is crucial in terms of business and the economy as a whole. It helps to mitigate the financial losses and reputational damages caused by cyber attacks, which can have far-reaching economic consequences. Perhaps in terms of national security, cyber security and cyber laws are closely linked, obviously, in terms of national security. And definitely effective law will enable governments to protect what they call critical infrastructure and respond to cyber threats that could actually compromise our national security. No doubt that in terms of innovation and technological development, by providing this substantive legal framework, it will protect intellectual property and also foster what they call trust in terms of online transactions. So cyber law, therefore, will encourage innovation and the development of new technologies. Now, in terms of digital diplomacy, that's another one. In terms of international relations, cyber law will play a very, very important role in terms of digital diplomacy, where countries, for example, negotiate agreements and norms to prevent what they call cyber conflicts and also promote responsible behavior in cyberspace. By the way, look for a book about space law, by the way, as well. Find it on lubogo.org. Cyber, in terms of ethics and education, cyber law will help contribute to the development of ethical guidelines and educational initiatives that promote what they call responsible digital citizenship and behavior. And then also, in terms of another advantage, in terms of accessibility and inclusivity, cyber law can address issues that relate to digital accessibility and inclusivity and ensure that people with disabilities, for example, have equal access to online services and content. And then also in terms of data sovereignty, where we are living in an era where data flows, and therefore cyber law can actually define rules around data sovereignty in determining where data can actually be stored and processed and under what conditions. Talk about healthcare and telemedicine. I was making this discussion with Professor Golling in Germany, and we're arguing in terms of AI and robotics and transhumanism. It will help telemedicine and digital health, will also is essential in terms of safeguarding what they call patient data and ensuring confidentiality and regulation among online healthcare services. And so that's another virgin area which is extremely important. In terms of social and political implications, cyber law has a social and political relevancy because it will govern the use of social media in terms of freedom of expression, in terms of online, and also influence of digital platforms, and also public discourse and elections as well. Talk about elections. So in essence, what cyber law is going to do is that it's going to be a multidisciplinary field that intersects with various aspects of modern life, and so although I'm making an advocacy for law, it can also fall in any other ambit. So as I said, from personal, privacy, in terms of national security, operations of international relations, and therefore its relevancy will continue to grow and become increasingly reliant on digital technology and the internet. Cyber is extremely highly relevant in Uganda and in many other countries. So due to the increasing reliance of digital technology, the internet in the nation is extremely important. What are some of the ways in which cyber is relevant to Uganda specifically? In Uganda, it will play a crucial role in terms of cyber crime prevention. Uganda faces cyber crime challenges such as hacking, online fraud, and identity theft. So cyber will provide legal framework to prosecute cyber criminals, to deter activities in terms of protecting both individuals and businesses. In terms of Uganda still, it will help in terms of data privacy and protection. With the growth of, as I said, of online services and data protection, protecting the privacy of Ugandan citizens' personal information is crucial. So cyber law will help to establish rules for data protection and informs organizations about their responsibilities regarding data security. I'm mindful that we have substantive laws on cyber, but I'm just making a stronger case for the advocacy for it in law schools. So e-commerce, for example, in terms of growth, Uganda's e-commerce sector is expanding rapidly. Therefore, cyber law will provide a basis for secure online transactions, consumer protection, and also dispute resolution, which is essential for the growth of what they call the digital economy. In terms of telecommunications and ICT development, Uganda's efforts to develop its information and communication technology sector rely on a secure and regulated digital environment. So cyber law definitely will support the growth of ICT infrastructure and services. No doubt, in terms of the national security, cyber security is an integral of the national security in Uganda, and therefore cyber law will help the government and also law enforcement agencies to respond to cyber threats and protect what they call critical infrastructure and safeguard national interests. And then in terms of international relations, Uganda obviously will participate in international efforts to combat cybercrime and also promote what they call responsible behavior in terms of cyberspace. So therefore, cyber law plays a role in Uganda's engagement with other nations on cyber-related matters. No doubt about that. In terms of youth and education, perhaps this is extremely important because cyber law can actually be used to promote what they call digital literacy, cybersecurity awareness, and even responsible online behavior among Ugandan youth. Talk about TikTok, talk about what? WhatsApp, talk about all the things, Telegram and the likes. So Ugandan youth can actually have a thorough education programs in terms of campaigns using these facets. In terms of digital governance, Uganda's government increasingly relies on digital system for governance in terms of service delivery. Therefore, cyber law will help us to guide the development of digital governance in terms of framework and also protect our citizens in terms of digital rights. Talk about digital rights and freedom of expression. There is no doubt that the internet, by the way, is a right, a human right, as provided for in the UN. Okay, and therefore, in terms of ensuring that Ugandans can exercise their digital rights, including freedom of expression online, while respecting legal boundaries, is important for the aspect of legal or cyber law for that purpose. So definitely, cyber law in Uganda, it becomes relevant for the, as I said, protection of individuals, for our businesses, and the nation as a whole in terms of the digital age. It will provide for what they call a legal foundation for addressing what they call cyber threats, promoting a secure digital environment, and fostering the growth of the digital economy and technology sector. Okay, in terms of other things that come to mind for purposes of importance, why this becomes a super important issue is cyber security and the capacity building. When cyber law can actually facilitate the efforts to enhance Uganda's cyber security in terms of capabilities. This includes, for example, training law enforcement agencies, or even cyber security professionals and legal experts to effectively respond to these cyber threats. Okay, so that's where specialization perhaps comes for those of you who want to specialize in cyber law. Okay, and then the protection of intellectual property. Cyber law is essential in terms of safeguarding intellectual property rights in Uganda, including copyrights, as I say, trademarks and patents, which is crucial for the promotion of innovation and creativity in the country, as I said. I emphasized and will emphasize healthcare and telemedicine. Take an example during the COVID-19 pandemic that has accelerated the adoption of telemedicine in terms of digital health solutions, even in our country. So cyber law can actually ensure privacy and security in terms of healthcare data, and these services become more trustworthy. In terms of electronic government services, Uganda's move towards providing government services online. You talk about economists, for example, for the lawyers in terms of documented filings and stuff, which will necessitate a robust legal framework in terms of ensuring security and privacy, even in terms of citizens' data in terms of digital interactions with government agencies. That becomes extremely important. Then financial technology, which other people call fintech. As fintech, for example, services grow in terms of popularity, cyber law will become vital in terms of regulating digital financial transactions, for example, and ensuring consumer protection and preventing fraud in the financial sector. As I said, youth and cyberbullying, man, I got calls from different students who have been telling me, one of them actually almost wanted to kill themselves. Two of them, by the way, from different universities, and I really tried to counsel them. Cyberbullying and online harassment are a concern among Uganda's youth. So cyber law can actually help us to address these issues in terms of establishing legal measurements to combat cyberbullying and protect these victims. That's why I came up with that talk on how to protect people from suicide. Okay, and then international trade and e-commerce. Uganda's businesses can actually benefit from international e-commerce. In terms of cross-border transactions, which require adherence in terms of cyber law principles, which ensure fair and secure trade. And then digital evidence in terms of legal proceedings. Okay, I just talked about economists. Cyber law provides guidelines in terms of collection, admissibility, and handling of digital services in terms of legal cases, and ensuring that digital evidence is actually treated fairly in court. Find my book about the future lawyer as well. It talks about robotics now in terms of presentation as legal entities. Cyber resiliency is another preparing for in terms of responding for cyber incidences. For example, cyber law can help us establish protocols for handling cyber emergencies and coordinating responses. So, as I said, Uganda definitely needs a robust and fundamental framework in terms of addressing these challenges and the opportunities that are presented in terms of the digital age. And as I said, it helps us in terms of safeguarding individual rights, support economic growth, contribute to the nation's overall cybersecurity and digital development. So when we incorporate cyber law in Uganda, it involves quite a number of steps. In terms of, first of all, the legal framework, a substantive, formidable legal framework to address these challenges and opportunities in terms of the digital age effectively. And how do we do that? I can give you some steps of how to do that. Number one, legislative action. the government of Uganda should enact comprehensive cyber legislation that actually defines cyber crimes, their penalties and procedures for investigation and prosecution. I know we had challenges in terms of that, but we need to have substantive people in terms of benchmarking. So the legislation should actually cover areas like data protection, electronic signatures, and intellectual property rights, which we have. But then the question is, how effective are they? Then government agencies should actually establish or designate government agencies responsible for enforcing and implementing cyber, which we have. But these agencies should actually include a dedicated cybersecurity authority, which we have, or division, which can work in terms of cybersecurity policy, awareness, and instant responses. I'm just making an emphasis, a case for purposes of more robust, involvement. Capacity building, invest in training programs for law enforcement agencies, judges, for example, lawyers, cybersecurity professionals, to ensure that they have necessary skills and knowledge to handle cyber-related cases effectively, which we have. The question is, are they effective? That's the point I'm making. Data protection laws, develop and implement data protection laws and regulations that govern collection, for example, processing, and even storage of personal data, ensuring the privacy of Ugandan citizens, that they are also protected as well. The other is in terms of cybersecurity standards, how we need to encourage the development and the adoption of cybersecurity standards and best practices for both government and private sector entities, protect what they call critical infrastructure and sensitive data. That is extremely important. Another one, which is super important as well, is international cooperation. We have to collaborate with international organizations, obviously such as Interpol, and regional cybersecurity organizations to ensure information sharing and also cooperation in terms of combating cybercrime. That also we have. But again, I'll keep being a drum measure. Public awareness, launch public awareness in terms of campaigns to educate citizens about cyber risks, safe online behavior, for example, and their rights and their responsibilities in terms of the digital space. Perhaps that is a bit lacking. I want to see more of that. Digital governance is another aspect in terms of develop and implement digital governance in terms of frameworks that actually ensure that government services and data are actually secure and accessible to all citizens online. And another vital one is in terms of industrial collaboration, where we need to encourage collaboration between government, for example, in terms of industries, in terms of the academia, to address emerging cybersecurity threats and challenges and promote innovation in cybersecurity fields. That becomes extremely important. In terms of e-commerce regulations, we need to create regulations and guidelines for what they call electronic commerce in terms of promoting the growth of digital economy while protecting consumers from fraud and also ensuring what they call fair competition. In terms of international agreements, which also becomes a very important aspect, we have to consider while entering these international agreements and treaties related to cyber and cyber security to strengthen Uganda's position in terms of what they call a global digital community. That becomes extremely important. And then in terms of legal aid and access to justice, this is extremely important. We have to ensure that individuals and businesses have access to legal aid in terms of support for cyber-related matters, and this promotes confidence in the legal system. I cannot overemphasize that. And then obviously we have to have what they call regular updates. Keep cyber laws and regulations up to date to adapt to the evolving cyber threats and technological advancement. That is extremely important. So incorporating cyber law in Uganda should be an ongoing process that requires a lot of cooperation between government, obviously, law enforcement, and also private sector and the civil society. So the intention is to aim to create a secure and conducive digital environment for all Ugandans so that our rights are protected and also promote the growth of the digital economy in terms of addressing those challenges that are posed by cyber threats. So it's extremely important as we argue some of the things. You cannot underestimate the strength and the importance of cyber. Okay. In terms of the legal framework, we have substantive legal framework. The question is how relevant. Sometimes some of these laws end up becoming nugatory. So that's perhaps a challenge. We have the Computer Misuse Act, for example. We had certain challenges in terms of whether or not certain sections were actually in tandem with principles of natural justice. In terms of the enforceability or in terms of the constitutionality of them. So when we address some of these things, we need to critically analyze and evaluate all these provisions I know that act makes provisions and also outlines penalties, but some of them, as you probably remember, caused a lot of issue in this country. We have the Electronic Transactions Act, for example, which provides a legal framework in terms of electronic commerce and transactions in Uganda, and it probably would cover things like contracts and electronic signatures and the legal recognition of electronic records. Obviously, we have data protection and privacy regulations. Those regulations also we provide for guidelines in terms of the protection of personal data and privacy of individuals. Obviously, they set out the principles in terms of collection, storage, and processing of personal data, as it were. We have Telecommunications Interception of Communications Act that probably provides for lawful interception of communications in terms of security purposes, and it usually outlines the procedures in terms of the conditions under which law enforcement agencies can actually intercept and monitor communications. Now, whether all that is in tandem with substantive international legal frameworks, that is the question of debate. We have national information security frameworks. So while not a law itself, but Uganda has developed a national information security framework that provides for guidelines and recommendations for enhancing in terms of information security across government agencies and critical infrastructure sectors as well. Then obviously the Uganda Communication Act, which establishes the Uganda Communication Commission, what we popularly call UCC. Its intention obviously is to regulate the communication in terms of sector in Uganda, including telecommunications and broadcasting. So UCC plays a role in terms of ensuring that cybersecurity is well canvassed within this sector. The Electronic Media Act as well, in terms of regulations of the media, in terms of broadcasting, while not in terms of specificity, in terms of cyber, it does include provisions that relate to regulation and also broadcasting standards, as it were. Some of these we need to canvass very well. The Copyright and Neighboring Act, or in terms of governing intellectual property rights, in terms of copyrights and neighboring related issues, its relevance obviously to cyber, maybe in terms of protecting digital content and also intellectual property in the digital space. So those are some of the key legislative provisions that are related, but you may find more. We'll discuss quite more and substantively more, if not all, in our book Cyber Law in Uganda by Isaac Christopher Lubogo, which you can readily find on Lubogo suigeneris.com. And as we continue to navigate through this course or this advocacy for cyber, I would like to suggest certain ambits, perhaps for law school, by way of a course descriptor. Some of the things that we need to look at in terms of a course descriptor for cyber law design in terms of the law school. We could look at things like cyber law and policy. That becomes extremely important. And the overview in terms of that will provide things to do maybe with an in-depth examination of the legal framework, for example, in terms of governing cyberspace, and perhaps focus on legal and ethical and even policy issues arising in the digital age. So students probably will be required to explore things like fundamental principles of cyber law, including cybercrime, data protection, intellectual property, things like privacy, and also the regulation of online activities. So also examining international aspects of cyber law and the role of government in terms of business, for example, and also individuals in ensuring a secure and lawful digital environment. And at the end of the day, what will be the ratio disdenda? What is the reason why this becomes important? The core principles is that students will be required to understand the concepts of cyber law, okay, and also perhaps analyze and evaluate things to do with legal and ethical issues related to the use of technology, for example, the internet, and then interpret and apply relevant statutes in terms of regulations and also case law when it comes to cyber law cases in Uganda and international, of course, and assess their impact in terms of individual rights, in terms of privacy, but also in terms of civil liberties. So the intention also is to create examination of the international treaties and agreements that relate to cyberspace, also for that purpose, and also cybersecurity in terms of challenges and strategies for the prevention and also responses, and investigating perhaps legal and ethical implications of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the Internet of Things, which I'll overemphasize that we have mentioned and written books in that area already. When you're introducing a course like cyber law, for example,